You know what's wild? The same woman who will go to the mat for everyone in her life is out here living by someone else's rule book. Today I'm showing you why the emperor is not a villain. We're going to talk about whose rules are actually running your life, why structure isn't the opposite of flow, and what it looks like to trust yourself to be in charge. Also, the Tarot Club Oracle deck is back, and I need your help building card 4. Hi, I'm Allison, founder of See Yourself Coaching and Allison Knows It All. This is Tarot Club, where we just drop that good girl persona and start living our life at full volume. In this series, we take a look at the tarot deck, we study the images and symbols, one card at a time. So the Emperor is card 4. If you just found us, I will link the playlist here for you so you can go back and watch that from the beginning. In the last episode, we met the Empress. So she's out here in the field. It's a beautiful summer day. She is out there on her velvet throne, building an empire. She creates, she receives, and she does not apologize for taking up space. And I left you with a heads up that we were moving from the flow of Mother Nature to the rules of the kingdom, and that we were going to talk about how to navigate that without shrinking. So that's happening today. Because what the Empress creates, the Emperor has to govern. And if you're not ruling your own life, that means someone else is. So let's get into it. I'm using a basic Rider-Waite Smith deck, though I will show you some other ones later on. So if you're following along with the deck at home, go ahead and pull it out now. If you're not, that's fine. You can pause this video while I've got a card up on the screen for you. But don't Google it yet or pull out that little white booklet. Just sit with the card and look at it. The colors, the symbols, the scene. What story is your mind coming up with? What impressions are coming up? Sit with that for a second before I dive into what I have to say. So, starting with the crown, this is obviously a symbol of the emperor being a ruler, just like in the Empress. But unlike most crowns, it's not just a circle around his head. It's like a closed off dome shape. And so this symbolizes to me that there's no higher power above this emperor. It's giving self-sufficiency, self-reliance, and the gold material signifies absolute power, and the height elevates his elevated godlike status as supreme ruler over all earthly matters. His hair and beard are white, which is telling us he's not an immature young warrior out here acting recklessly. He's already fought his battles. He's survived and mastered the lessons of life. The long beard is a symbol of a ultimate father figure, right? Someone who provides, protects, establishes law and order, and builds solid foundations. He's also the first bearded figure we meet in the major arcana. We met the Fool and the Magician, who are both presenting as younger men and clean shaven. The Emperor's red robe demonstrates passion and action in his authority. Red is the dominant color on this card. This is a stark contrast to the yellow and green of the Empress's card. We could say that the yellow on the Empress's card is sunrise, and the Emperor's card is sunset, kind of emphasizing that mirror or yin-yang quality between these two cards. The color red is directly associated with Mars and Aries, who both rule this card. It represents his raw vitality, his drive, and the fire behind everything he does. It's saying that his leadership is fueled by passion for building structure and maintaining order over the material world. Now, draped over his shoulders is like a cape or a sash. I'll just call it a cape. And it might be blue or purple depending on the deck you have. Now, historically, blue and purple fabrics were super expensive and really only affordable for people at the highest levels, royalty. So reinforcing the emperor's status as an elite authority figure. So where the red robe supplies that fire, the blue cape brings in the element of air. Air governs intellect, strategic thought, communication. So we see that his fiery side is regulated by a cool, more calculating, disciplined mind. On his arms and legs, you can see a little bit of armor peeking out from under that red garment. And he wears this armor to signify his strength and power. So armor isn't something that warriors just sat around in all day. So seeing him pictured on the throne wearing it is a way of saying he's always prepared to go into battle. Even though he's sitting down, he's actively prepared to defend his kingdom, protect his boundaries, and enforce his laws at a moment's notice. Psychologically, the armor also represents a shield against vulnerability, emotion, and outside influence. So unlike the Empress in that loose dress, the Emperor rules with cold logic and keeps his emotions pretty heavily guarded. Now, in his left hand, the Emperor holds this golden apple or sphere, and this represents the whole world, like the actual globe. It reminded me of a Sunday school song, He's Got the Whole World in His Hands. So this means he has control and responsibility over the physical, material world. It rests in his left hand, which is traditionally the hand of receiving and intuition. And so this tells us his authority is well established. It's secure. He doesn't need to fight to conquer the world. He's already holding it in his hands. Now, in his right hand, he's holding the Ankh, the Egyptian symbol of life. With him holding that, that's telling us he's not just some destructive tyrant. He's also a creator, just like the Empress. But while she creates out of nature, he creates through structure. He creates laws and civilizations that allow life to safely thrive within its bounds. And because it's held in his right hand, which is traditionally the hand of action and giving, it shows that he's actively using that power to enforce and build and protect his subjects. An interesting side note, if you saw the last episode on the Empress, you might remember that her scepter combined both the staff and the globe into one symbol, whereas the Emperor is holding them separately. So it's the same energy, but a different relationship to it. So the Emperor is sitting on this blocky throne. It's gray, which symbolizes impartiality. And it also represents permanence and durability. Stone doesn't rot or bend or yield. And so it shows that the laws, institutions, and authority that he has will last for generations. The four corners can illustrate the 4 points of the compass. So that kind of calls us back to that golden sphere. The square shape also represents the number 4, which happens to be the number of the Emperor card. This is the ultimate geometric shape of a structure, organization, limits, and the physical world. This is also true for the number 4, numerologically speaking. That is really hard to say. It took me a lot of takes to get that out. There are ram's heads carved into the throne. Now, rams are the symbols of Aries, which in the zodiac is a cardinal fire sign ruled by Mars. So this tells us the Emperor is a pioneer, a trailblazer. He's a natural-born leader who relies on courage, initiative, and willpower. So there are some bare, rocky mountains behind the Emperor's throne. And this reminded me of the mountains in the Fool's card. If you remember, there were some kind of intense, scary-looking mountains off in the distance in his card, and that was kind of a reminder of there's some tough challenges ahead. These mountains also are kind of a nod to the Emperor himself. He is kind of stony-faced, right? And this is also in contrast to the green landscapes from the Empress, and these mountains symbolize ambition, isolation, and defense. You can imagine the mountains being kind of encircling around behind the empire, just kind of keeping it closed in and protected. The sky behind the mountains is orange or red, and this is reinforcing that connection to fire, Aries, and Mars. And that background represents the passionate, creative, maybe aggressive sometimes, fire that burns beneath his serious face. And now it's not super visible in the deck that I have, but behind the Emperor's throne is a very small, thin river. And this contrasts the mountains, providing a little bit of hope for growth in these rocky landscapes. It's also a direct connection to the Empress. In tarot and astrology and other systems, water is a universal symbol for emotions, intuition, and the subconscious mind. So while the Empress has that wide, free-flowing, rushing waterfall that's irrigating her entire garden, the Emperor's water is a thin little trickling stream. And so this is again telling us, like the armor, that he doesn't let his emotions or feelings rule him. He's compartmentalized his emotions so he can make unbiased, logical decisions for his empire. So he has feelings, but they're strictly bound. And even though this landscape looks completely barren and totally devoid of life, that tiny river proves that it's still possible. And it hints that beneath his cold exterior, his throne and heavy armor, he still possesses a spark of human compassion and emotional depth. It's just hidden and heavily guarded. The Emperor is connected to 2 chakras. The root chakra rules survival, security, structure, and safety. And you can see that represented in the throne, the armor, and basically the whole visual weight of this card. The Emperor's primary job is to build a foundation that keeps his empire secure. But his personality is driven by his solar plexus. So this is personal power, will, identity, and leadership. He uses that solar plexus fire to build and protect the stable foundation his kingdom needs. If you like working with crystals, basically anything red works here for the Emperor. I personally like carnelian and garnet, but there's also ruby, red jasper, and many others. Just go to your local metaphysical shop and see what they have handy. Red stones typically enhance stamina, grounding, focus, courage, and vitality. Then for herbs, you're going to want something that is sharp and warming, that stimulates fire, inner drive, and strong physical boundaries. So I came up with ginger, cayenne, black pepper, and nettles. These herbs are all associated with Mars, and they're action-oriented, not passive. Now, before we go any further, I want to zoom out for a second, because if you watched the Empress episode and you're looking at the Emperor right now, I need to acknowledge there's a bit of a whiplash. We've talked a little bit already about the differences. When you put these 2 cards side by side, it's not just the visual contrast. The deck is doing something intentional here. She's got lush summer, ripe grain, flowing water. She's got these velvet cushions. He's got a stone throne, armor, and a barren mountain range. She's earth and he's fire. She grows things and he drives things forward. And neither one is better than the other. They do totally different jobs. The Empress brings ideas into physical reality, and the Emperor decides what happens to them next. She births the empire and he runs it. One without the other breaks down. If you create without ruling, it kind of just dissolves and falls apart. And if you rule and govern without creating, what are you ruling? You're just maintaining an empty framework that does nothing. And so this is where we're at in the journey of the major arcana, the Fool's journey, if you remember. If you've been following from the beginning, let's look at what we've walked through so far. So the Fool started at 0. No rules, no baggage, just that first step off a cliff into the unknown. Then the Magician had all the tools on the table. So everything you need is already in front of you. The High Priestess says, slow down, go inward, trust what you already know. The Empress said, stop waiting to feel ready. Let it come through you, create, receive, take up space. And now the Emperor says, govern what you made, protect it, enforce it. You couldn't skip ahead to this point. You had to live through all of that first. And if you're watching this feeling like you're not ready to be the Emperor, that's perfectly fine. Maybe you're still in Empress receiving mode, which means you're exactly where you're supposed to be. What the Empress creates, the Emperor has to govern. And we're going to talk about what that actually looks like, because ruling your own life doesn't mean becoming harder or colder. It means stopping the habit of living according to someone else's framework. But first, what does it mean when the Emperor shows up in a reading? So the Emperor signifies leadership, strategic planning, and the establishment of boundaries to achieve success. It can also mean dealings with authority figures, whether a parent or a boss or something like that. And in a yes or no reading, he represents a firm, decisive yes, especially when the situation requires logic, discipline, and organization. I've got 2 thoughts on reversals. The first would be more of a tyrant, misuse of power, control freak kind of behavior, bullying, stubbornness, rigidity. And then on the flip side would be something weaker, a lack of discipline, a lack of boundaries, and an ability to stand up for yourself. So let's take a look at some emperors from other decks. The Modern Witch is currently my favorite deck for daily pulls. And this emperor is interesting because it's a younger person, not an old man with a beard. The ram is represented here by horns on the person's head. And to me, this throne looks a little beaten up. The mountains from the original card are now a city skyline. And the emperor has the Ankh staff, but there's no globe. There's also no armor, but that would be out of place in a modern card. The emperor is dressed a little bit formally with this red suit, so perhaps that is their armor. Next, I have Tattoo Tarot, and I didn't realize until researching for this card that this deck is in the Tarot de Marseille tradition, not the Rider-Waite. The general meaning of the emperor is similar enough, though he's depicted differently. He's seated, but rather than seated firmly on his throne, he appears to be kind of leaning up against it, ready to stand up at a moment's notice. This is more of an earth element card versus the fire that we've been talking about. Instead of rams, we see an eagle. Tarot de Marseille predates the reimagining by Arthur Waite in the early 1900s. He reimagined it in a more esoteric, astrologically based system. Historically speaking, the eagle was a supreme symbol of the Holy Roman Empire, and this eagle then shows us the person on this card is a ruler over the physical world and laws. The Marseille eagle focuses on a ruler who builds things, concrete things, through strategic vision, while the ram on the Rider-Waite focuses on a ruler who defends things through authority and force. Have you ever heard of Tarot de Marseille? It's a very different system, and I'm excited to revisit this deck now that I know not to compare it to Rider-Waite. And then this is the Body Tarot deck, and it's very unusual. I shared this deck back in the episode on the Fool, and I wanted to bring it back because it adds such a unique layer of meaning. This deck associates the Emperor with the brain and explicitly calls in authority and links in the fire element. Of course, the fire element matches the Rider-Waite card, but typically the brain, thinking, intelligence is associated with the air element. But when you consider if someone is brain dead, they're usually pronounced dead. So while the brain isn't the fire or the battery keeping the body alive, it's absolutely key to keeping us up and going. So the brain as the seat of authority basically sums up how we can think of the emperor. And once you start seeing him that way as the part of us that's in charge, that makes the calls, that keeps everything running, you start spotting him everywhere. And I wanted to show you some pop culture versions who get it right, because I think this card gets a bad rap. People see the armor and the throne and the face and the beard, and they assume he's the villain. But at his best, he is someone who builds order out of chaos, enforces rules for the greater good, and becomes a stabilizing foundation that everyone else gets to grow and thrive inside of. So we'll start there. And this first one may be a bit of a hot take, but Tywin Lannister from Game of Thrones. So yes, he leans ruthless, but I think the textbook emperor, obsessed with legacy, structure, and institutional power. He says, any man who must say, I am the king, is no true king. And this is pure emperor energy, right? True authority doesn't need to say, hey, yeah, I'm in charge here. It doesn't need to yell or announce itself. It just is. On a kinder, gentler note, we've got Mufasa from The Lion King, a far more benevolent father figure. He defines the circle of life, which is just another natural law and structure. He teaches Simba about responsibility and boundaries and the weight of maintaining order in their kingdom. Consider Captain Raymond Holt from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Comedic, yes, but deeply accurate. He walks into this chaotic precinct and establishes rules and structure, not out of a need to be cruel or controlling, but because he genuinely believes that structure allows people to thrive and protects them from a chaotic world. So that's the emperor at his best. But what happens when the structure stops serving the people inside it and starts serving the emperor's ego instead? we get someone like President Snow from the Hunger Games, the ultimate order over humanity emperor. He explicitly states that the Hunger Games exist to keep the districts in check because total control is the only thing preventing total chaos. Don Draper from Mad Men, I think, is a brilliant example. He wants absolute authority over his creative department and his household, but it's a mask for profound inner instability. He uses emotional distance as armor, demands conformity from his wife and subordinates, and he unravels the moment he can't control the narrative. Then we've got Miranda Priestley from The Devil Wears Prada. She built and maintains the empire of Runway magazine. She demands absolute perfection and total submission from her assistants, using fear to rule. Her armor doesn't crack in public. She chooses the empire over everything. And here's something worth noticing. In classic tarot, the emperor sits on a throne and wears a crown. But when we translate that into modern archetype, the crown is typically replaced by a corner office and the empire with a corporation. So the question here is, has our cultural definition of absolute authority shifted from government and bloodlines to capital and quarterly earnings? Because Lex Luthor, Gordon Gekko, Mr. Burns from The Simpsons, these are not emperors, but they're running out of the same playbook. Now, I've missed some. There are emperors hiding everywhere once you start to look. An obvious one would be Emperor Palpatine from the Star Wars series. But who did I miss? I want to know who your emperor is. Is it a righteous builder, a tyrant, a fat cat in a corner office? Let me know in the comments. And then while you're down there, I need help with something. Back in the High Priestess episode 3, we started building a Tarot Club Oracle deck. So far, we have 2 cards. The Incognito Browser tab, and that's where you go to search for information that you're not ready to go public with yet. And this corresponds to the veil between the natural and supernatural world. The unsent draft is that hot take email to your boss, that spicy post that you banged out at 2 a.m., but you haven't hit send yet. And not out of a lack of courage, but knowing that some things are to be shared with others and some things are just for you to work through things. So I wanted card 3 to come from the Emperor, and I'm adding the calendar block. In my life, if it's not on my calendar, it doesn't exist. So this card represents taking control of your day instead of letting other people's priorities dictate your life. It's a visual declaration that your time, your creative work, your rest are sacred and non-negotiable. So it's your turn. What's a modern symbol for self-authority? Not power over others, but power over your own life and your own rules. What's an image that captures the moment you stop asking for permission and start deciding for yourself? Drop it in the comments, and the best one will get added to the deck as card 4. What's interesting about the calendar block is that we think of it as a productivity hack, but it's really just setting boundaries. It's you saying, this is mine, it's not up for negotiation, and I don't need to justify it to anyone. And the fact that that feels radical, for some women, it feels like a lot to put something on your own calendar and protect it. Wow. The next step then is to stick to that boundary, right? No moving it for someone else's meeting, for someone else's emergency, or just not showing up for yourself. The Emperor isn't just about building structure, it's about enforcing it too. You don't have a productivity problem, you have a self-trust problem. And I want to be clear about what that looks like, because it doesn't look like chaos. It does look like being very busy, very capable, but also handing your decision making to other people's frameworks, someone else's timeline, society's standards, someone else's definition of what you're allowed to want, someone else's opinion of what a successful woman looks like. And then you reshaping yourself, cutting little pieces off to fit inside of that picture. I'm not saying you need to become harder or colder or more rigid or militant. You just need to be the one who decides for yourself, not someone who consults everyone else in the group chat before she trusts her own take on a situation. And I want to touch on structure and systems. So many people see structure as restriction or a straitjacket, but the structure I build for myself is not the opposite of flow. It's actually what makes flow possible for me. My calendar and systems and procedures and methods aren't me becoming rigid and militant. These frameworks are what allow me to find freedom and creativity, knowing everything else is taken care of. And so that's the Emperor. Not a cage, but a foundation or framework to work within. And once you've built it and trust yourself to enforce it, everything else gets easier. The decisions and boundaries, knowing what you want and going after it without running it by 12 other people first. Now, if you're just sitting with a decision that you already know the answer to but can't quite make yourself commit to it, that's what Power Hour is for. It's 60 minutes, you and me, and you bring that thing, you leave with a decision made. The loop is closed, you're not up all night stewing about it. No more circling. The link is in the description. And if you want to embody what the Emperor is doing in this card, not just understand it cerebrally, but feel it, I've got journaling prompts and affirmations in the description, so go check them out. Thank you so much for watching. I enjoyed exploring the Emperor with you. If you liked this video, go ahead and hit like and subscribe so you don't miss a video. Next up is card 5, the Hierophant. And this is a card that nobody knows what to do with. He's confusing, intimidating, and a lot of people straight up just don't like him. So we'll dive in to learn why. But until then, that's the tea from the tarot. Go out and live it.